Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kailey Leinz.
Iran fires missiles into Jordan and Kuwait while LNG ships are struck in Egypt. Welcome to the Thursday edition. As the war with Iran threatens to widen into a regional conflict with another round of strikes overnight by the U.S. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kailey Leinz in Washington. Kailey, this comes a day after the Saudis entered the conflict, actually striking targets in Iraq.
Yep.
The oil prices, interesting today, are pulling back.
Just ever so slightly.
Yeah.
We're still in and around $90 a barrel for Brent crude, as there is concern, to your point, Joe, that this could escalate not just between the U.S. and Iran, but to other players in the region and perhaps widen in circumference, if you will, the area in which oil traders and others have to be concerned in the Middle East. It remains to be seen whether or not CENTCOM will continue strikes as we saw last night. We have not yet heard from the president today about this, and it's unclear if we will.
That's true. He's been talking about the confirmation process for Todd Blanche, at least on Truth Social. We haven't heard from him out loud today, but talking about his nominee for Attorney General, whose confirmation vote has been delayed because of opposition from two senators who the president chose to primary. And now they're having their day, apparently. But it's unclear exactly when this might happen, if not till after the August recess.
Well, or after the election, President Trump calling out Senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis by name, saying that he has, and this is a quote, no objection to temporarily withdrawing Todd's name from this process if they don't do the right thing, and putting him back after Cornyn and Tillis are out of office. Of course, there's no guarantee that they'll be replaced by Republicans.
That's
next
correct.
year.
Yeah, we'll have a lot to talk about there when we check in with Tyler Kendall, who's at the White House. And also interesting, as we seize on the news from Iran, we're going to spend some time with Jane Harman. She's actually going to be with us in studio here. There's a lot to cover, not just in what's taken place over the last 24 hours, but we'll get her view on this whole region today, live from Washington.
Yep, we're looking forward to that conversation, but we kick things off, as always, with a check on the markets. And for that, we turn to Charlie Pellet up in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Kailey and Joe. Indeed, looking at a sudden spike higher for the S&P 500 index. Best level of the day right now, up 105. We're higher by 1.4%. Dow Industrials up 1.1%, making up some of yesterday's sell-off. On the Dow, that is a gain now of just about 568 points. NASDAQ Composite surging 623 points now, up by 2.5%. NASDAQ 100 index up by 3.1%. We're seeing a stampede of dip buyers coming into the market for semiconductor shares. The SOX, you don't get quotes like this that often, up 8.1%. That is the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index. The VIX back below 18. The 2-year, a day after the Fed decision, 4.21%. The 10-year now at 4.65%. And the 30-year, 5.20%. Gold up 1%, 41.09 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.4%. WTI 84.13 a barrel. Brent 89.65, down by 1.2%. Coming up after the close of trading, two more members of the Mag 7 Index. We will be hearing from both Apple and Amazon. Apple ahead of earnings, down 1.8%. Amazon ahead of earnings, up 5.3%. Speaking of Amazon, its driverless car business, Zoox, will be allowed to commercially deploy as many as 2,500 vehicles annually in the U.S. over the next 2,000 years. That means 5,000 additional driverless cars on the road. Yesterday, we heard from both Meta Platforms and Microsoft. Meta down now by 9.6%. Microsoft, a stock we were talking about for much of the morning here, we've got Microsoft surging by 16.7%. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. I'm Charlie Pellet. Joe and Kailey, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet watching the markets for us. Thank you so much. When Jersey Mike's begins trading in these public markets, we'll, of course, keep you apprised after a $1 billion IPO priced at $23 a share. They're indicated right now to open just below that, and we'll, of course, bring you details as we get them on when that debut happens. In the meantime, we're watching Capitol Hill and what, frankly, is not happening on Capitol Hill at this time. It was supposed to be today, this morning, that the Judiciary Committee was going to start marking up the confirmation of Todd Blanche to be the next Attorney General. Problem is, two members of that committee, Senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis, are not yet there to vote to advance Blanche because of concern over the anti-weaponization fund and the audit immunity deal for the president and his family, and wanting written language from the DOJ to alter those things or commit to not pursuing them. That hasn't happened. Their votes aren't there. Therefore, the vote didn't happen. And perhaps it won't for the time being, as President Trump today suggests he's open to just pulling Blanche's nomination until both of these men are out of office, Joe.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to hear the president's words and not clear exactly who he would replace Blanche with, unless he would remain on an acting level. There was talk in the tip sheets this morning, Kailey, of Bill Pulte being installed just to poke senators in the middle of this. He writes, Todd Blanche is a star and everyone knows it. He has the potential to go down as one of the greatest attorney generals of all time. However, John Cornyn of Texas, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, both of whom I refuse to endorse, are refusing to vote for this great nominee. He will remain in any event as acting. He goes on to say, Kailey, I have no objection to temporarily withdrawing Todd's name if they do not do the right thing. I'd be very curious to see how he handles this. Of course, the DOJ could simply provide John Cornyn a piece of paper and this would all be done.
Well, yes, that's very true. And we're going to get more on this with Tyler Kendall at the White House in just a moment. But first, some breaking news. As we said, we were waiting the debut of Jersey Mike's. And indeed, that opening has now happened at $21 a share, so $2 below that IPO price of $23. Remember, $23 was in the middle of the marketed range. This IPO raised $1 billion, and we're losing a little bit of that value, at least in the first few moments of trading here. Jersey Mike's opening at $21 a share. Bloomberg Markets correspondent for TV and radio, Nora Melinda, is standing by in New York to walk us through this. So, Nora, a little soft on the debut here.
Yes, we are seeing shares a bit lower. Of course, we do see the open for Jersey Mike's, JMKE on the ticker. The IPO opening at $21 per share. The IPO was actually at $23 per share. So a tiny bit of a disappointment here for some investors. We do know that this was actually, though, an IPO that was 15 times, oversubscribed. So that really just tells you about the institutional demand here, especially when you think about investors being picky. If you just think about a year ago, we saw an IPO market that felt pretty quiet. This year, we're getting a ton of big names. This company in particular, Jersey Mike's, really showing you that investors are still looking at companies that are in the consumer space that have great value. This is a company that is known for high margins and also being asset light.
Down a little over 7% now, just over $21, down 7% from the IPO price. It is interesting here when we think about an IPO, to your point, Nora, 15 times oversubscribed. We hear that about a lot of IPOs, and it does not always correlate with the debut. Today, I guess, is the latest example of this.
Yes, we're seeing this clearly being demonstrated today as we're seeing Jersey Mike's opening here and seeing some trading, but we really are seeing investors in this market looking for quality names. We've been seeing a lot of focus, a lot of concentration on what has been market leadership, which is those tech companies. SpaceX, of course, being a name that we've been really watching very closely. But it is interesting, you know, on Wall Street, as I'm speaking to my sources, about seeing a bit of diversification, and Jersey Mike's being an example of that. Maybe not all of the money in the market has to go exclusively to tech. Maybe there is room for some of these other names. So we'll have to see whether or not this stock finds its way back to the upside.
Well, and when we consider the money that was raised in the initial offering, Nora, do we have a sense of what the company is intending to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is something that investors are going to be continuing to watch and seeing how they want to deploy it. Of course, we know that this is a company that is one of the biggest chains in the United States. They also have a presence in Canada. So we know that this is also a Blackstone-backed company. They did hop into the company about a year ago, and we're already seeing this IPO coming out. So we'll have to see whether or not the company continues to considers using this capital toward really building out more stores, or how they intend to really use this money to address their balance sheet.
Pretty amazing, Nora, to see there's already a buy rating out there. This stock has been open for trading a couple of minutes. First buy rating from Melius Research with a price target of $30 a share. Would be a nice jump from here if it happened, pointing to the company as the only scaled premium operator in a category whose dominant incumbent is closing roughly 700 restaurants a year. I guess talking about Subway there. It's all up in the eyes of Melius for Jersey Mike's.
Absolutely. So it's interesting to see that buy rating coming out just so quickly. The stock has only been trading for just a few minutes here, but we're already seeing that buy rating on Wall Street. We'll have to see what other analysts are saying and where they potentially see opportunity within this company. That $30 price target really telling when we take a look at where the stock is trading right now.
All right, you got us all hungry, Nora. Thank you, as always, for walking us through a new issue. Jersey Mike's today. We'll keep tabs on the price, a couple dollars below the IPO at the moment. Live from Washington here on Balance of Power, we continue our conversation about politics and apparently a confirmation process now on ice. That would be Todd Blanche, the president's acting attorney general, because of, as we already laid out, the opposition from two senators who have crossed the president, or maybe it was the other way around. They want actual hard paper and a guarantee that the president's proposed anti-weaponization fund will not happen, and they have not received it yet. The president's not pleased about this, and we bring in Tyler Kendall from the North Lawn of the White House. He was out posting early on this, Tyler, and it looks like he says he might even withdraw Todd Blanche's name.
Well, Joe, that's the latest strategy point from President Trump, that we could see Todd Blanche's nomination withdrawn on a temporary basis, seeming to indicate that he would then re-nominate him after these two Republican senators, John Cornyn, the Republican from Texas, and Thom Tillis, the Republican from North Carolina, are out of office after the midterm elections. Now, the understanding here is that Todd Blanche would very likely continue in an acting basis, so not much would change, but it's an interesting political calculus considering that there are no assurances that Republicans will maintain control of the Senate chamber. So the idea had been to try to get these nominees through as quickly as possible if they do need Senate confirmation. Now, as you're laying out here, the demands from these senators is that there has to be something actually in writing, put pen to paper, that $1.8 billion fund, that alleged anti-weaponization fund, those plans are being scrapped, as well as that these senators want assurances that this provision in that legal settlement struck between President Trump and the IRS, giving him, members of his family, business immunity from this past IRS audits, that this will not extend to any third parties. They want a little bit more of a firmer guardrail around that IRS settlement. At this point, we'll have to see where it goes from here, but President Trump clearly putting out one option when it comes to holding firm, I guess, with his political agenda.
Yep, so he has options domestically, Tyler. He also has suggested, and it's been widely reported, that he's considering his options for escalation or the lack thereof when it comes to Iran. Until yesterday, it seemed that he wanted to pursue diplomacy anew, and that surprise attack on U.S. forces in Jordan led to the U.S. retaliating in strikes last night. Do we know if there will be another round this evening?
Well, Kailey, at this point, the White House has kept both options on the table, one for further escalation and this continuation of strikes and retaliation, that cycle it feels like we're in, but also the potential that we could see maybe some sort of diplomatic channel open here. We did hear from Pakistan's foreign ministry earlier today, of course, a key mediator in this conflict, seeming to imply that there are negotiations happening between the U.S. and Iran when it comes to potentially reopening the Strait of Hormuz. But at the same time, pair that with other headlines this morning that said Iranian state media reported that the IRGC had targeted again U.S. forces in Kuwait and Jordan. And we have this now potential, as you both were outlining at the top of the program, that the conflict could spill over to the broader region, including the fact that we saw overnight 2 LNG tankers hit off the coast of Egypt, marking the first such attacks in Egyptian waters since the conflict began. So, Joe and Kailey, there is a lot of room for escalation here.
Indeed. All right, Tyler Kendall reporting live from the North Lawn of the White House for us. Thank you so much. And as we consider the room that exists for escalation or for diplomacy, we turn now to former Congresswoman Jane Harman, the former ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, who is here with us in our Washington, D.C. studio. Good to see you again, Jane. Thanks for being here on Bloomberg TV and radio. We seem to be stuck in this cycle here of we're talking, we're striking, we're talking, we're striking. What breaks us out of it, and in what direction?
I just think Trump is afraid to lose, and he's keeping everything going, hoping he won't lose. But guess what? I think he's likely to lose. And not just lose here, but the fact that missile interceptors are tied up in the Middle East instead of going to Ukraine, or instead of being prepositioned in Asia against a possible China takeover of Taiwan, means he may lose elsewhere. So I think this is hugely dangerous, even more destabilizing than before. The Senate's about to go out. The House is out. There hasn't been a really serious, focused authorization to use force here, and we could lose more Americans while we're at it.
What does Jane Harman think when Saudi Arabia puts fighter jets in the air to strike targets in Iraq, when Egypt is being targeted by, we're not even sure who, drones are hitting LNG? We talked about Kuwait and Jordan. At what point do we start calling this a Middle Eastern war?
Well, I'll go right there.
It
is a Middle Eastern war. It's not that every country is at war, but every country is a target. Think Egypt, which hasn't been a target. Think Jordan, which is a target. And the Saudis haven't been getting along with the neighborhood, so maybe there's some play there that I'm missing. But my point is, the danger of this spreading is huge. And we are tying up what's left of our pathetic, fragile defense industrial base in a region where it shouldn't be.
Well, that probably is sending something of a signal to our adversaries, Jane, to your point about we could lose elsewhere if we lose in the Middle East. Is that genie already out of the bottle? Or if all of this were to stop now, is the U.S. adequately prepared to address needs should they arise in other theaters?
Not really. I chaired something called the Commission on the National Security Strategy. I know you both have read the report and loved it. 2 years ago, and on a unanimous bipartisan basis, we said the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base, is anemic. We made all kinds of suggestions, many of which were ignored. We also said our diplomacy was being starved, and that's a huge risk here, too, because I don't know who is talking to the Iranians and whether we have a serious, sophisticated team doing this in Pakistan or anywhere else. But yes, think Ukraine. Zelensky was just here begging for missile interceptors. Trump promised them and promised that some U.S. primes would be able to build some of these with Ukraine in Ukraine. However, that's going to take years, and Ukraine is a big, fat target right now for Russia.
I want to ask you about the rhetoric that the president has been using, because there's a lot of tough talk, even as he says that they're begging for a deal and we could have a breakthrough, we're going to have a deal. Not only has he threatened civilian targets like power plants and water desalination plants, he told Fox yesterday he was going to beat the effing S out of them, which
noticed.
Draws me to this this quick, if you would, data from Cardiff University. You spent enough years in politics to appreciate this. Cursing is in. Presidents, vice presidents, presidential hopefuls have used profanity at least 692 times in public since 1919. 605 of those were in the last 10 years. A lot of it is because of Donald Trump's approach to politics. Bernie Moreno's using the F word with Dr. Fauci up there. But how does that resonate overseas in a different language, in a different culture? How is that interpreted by Iran?
It's by Iran, I'm sure it's offensive, but they're offended anyway, and frankly, their behavior doesn't really justify their offense. But broadly across the world, people are really insulted. And just even think our neighbors in Canada. This language is terrible. Do you want your children to use these words? I remember my grandchildren had the Bad Word Club, which I unfortunately qualified for a few times and had to run around their apartment.
Not you.
Even me. But it wasn't that bad, and it was in private. But this is ugly, and both sides are using it. It's not just Republicans. But to have the president of our country use words on a regular basis that are truly inflammatory just is very troubling and hurts further U.S. leadership.
Well, as Joe mentioned, the colorful language from one senator, Bernie Moreno, yesterday, I had my eye on all of the senators as Jane, as we were having this conversation, we're just taking a vote on another war powers resolution, and yet another has failed 49 to 50. Are you surprised by that?
Well, I remember the days in the George W. Bush administration, not my party, when we voted, when, first of all, the president made the case to Congress about the need for an AUMF first for Afghanistan and then for Iraq. And Congress voted AUMFs for both. The first one was justified. The problem there was once we satisfied its objective, which was to go after those who attacked us, we stayed there. That was a mistake. On Iraq, it turns out the intelligence was wrong, and my vote for it was wrong. But at least it was a deliberative process. This is more performative. This is, let's do a press release today, and let's do a press release tomorrow. And the two sides are really not, I mean, the Congress, House and Senate, really not addressing the specific issues. What is authorized? What isn't authorized? Are we going to justify more American deaths? I hope not. I see this war as very dangerous, not just for U.S. security, but for world security.
Even got dangerous in the Caspian Sea this week as Ukraine enters the fray and attacks an Iranian commercial cargo ship that you probably saw. It's unclear what was on this vessel. They thought maybe missile parts or something on the way to Russia.
That's why they did it, or allegedly.
Sure. But again, we get back to Kailey's point. The radius is widening.
It's
Jane.
Worldwide. And the suffering from the lack of oil supplies, fertilizer, and so forth is worldwide.
Well, yeah, that certainly is true, and it's being felt here at home domestically. For all of the president's public statements that he doesn't care about the midterms, that if Iran is trying to essentially put price pressure on him ahead of the midterms, that they would be mistaken. Do you believe that that's actually true the closer we get to November?
Well, he's not on the ballot. That would be something
Sure.
he would say, so why should he care? On the other hand, he's going to be really hemmed in if both houses flip, or I think he will be. And I even think not just the people he didn't endorse. I mean, he's mad at Cornyn and Tillis, but I think a lot of other people are going to get braver because they're going to realize as his poll numbers sink and the popularity of this war is, below zero, that they better move away from it and him.
Once primary season is over, it's going to be interesting to see some of these
You
pivots,
bet.
Jane. Stay in touch with us. It's great to have you here, and I hope your summer's going well.
Just
Jane
notice
Harman.
I'm here.
She is here right now.
Very nice to
I
have
think
you.
you were last time, too. She's practically living in the bureau now, which is good for everybody, I think. Jane,
Thanks.
thank you so much. Alongside Kailey Leinz, I'm Joe Mathieu. We'll assemble our political panel next. We want to get an update on Wall Street first. Charlie Pellet has his eyes on a market reaching new highs in this session. Charlie, what's going on?
Absolutely right about that, Joe Mathieu. You run the GIP screen on the S&P 500 index, looking at a gain right now of 109 points on the S&P. As you correctly point out, best level of the day right now. Stocks are advancing up 1.5%. We've got the Dow up 1.1%. NASDAQ higher by 2.6%. The NASDAQ 100 index rebounding by 3.2%. To answer the question, what's happening? We're looking at a rebound in giant chip makers. That is lifting stocks. Again, those dip buyers coming in. And the SOX, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange Semiconductor Index, surging now by 8.3%. Again, on the NASDAQ 100 index, up by 3.2%. The VIX back below 18, a 10-year, a day after the Fed, currently trading 4.66%. The all-important 2-year, 4.22%. And the 30-year now at 5.20% on the 30-year. Gold up $38 the ounce to $41.05. That is a gain of 0.9%. A retreat for crude, $83.88 a barrel, down now by 0.7%. Barrel of Brent, $89.47, down now by 1.4%. Intercontinental Exchange, the parent of the New York Stock Exchange, has agreed to buy Market Access Holdings for about $6 billion in cash. Bloomberg LP, parent company of Bloomberg Radio, competes with electronic platforms to offer trading, data, and information to the financial services industry. And KKR posted a record profit in the second quarter, fueled by $1.29 billion of asset sales. That is the most in the firm's 50-year history. KKR up now by 1.9%. Two more members of the Mag 7 Index report after the close of trading today, Apple and Amazon. And coming up at 2:40 p.m. Wall Street time, Jersey Mike CEO Charlie Morrison. Jersey Mike's shares are slumping now by just about 1.5%. They went out the gate at $23 a share. Jersey Mike shares trading right now right around $22.50. Company and its shareholders raised about $1 billion in this morning's IPO. Again, recapping here, we got semiconductors ripping higher right now with the SOX up 8.2%, NASDAQ 100 index up 3.2%, the S&P up by 1.5%. Joe and Kailey, That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you very much. We always love an IPO day here on Bloomberg TV and radio. $1 billion for Jersey Mike's. Yeah, everybody have a sandwich. Obviously, a smaller IPO and not as stellar of a debut as ones we have experienced recently, including, of course, perhaps the mother of all IPOs in SpaceX earlier this year, even if it has fallen back below its IPO price. And Elon Musk, the leader of the company, is no longer a trillionaire on paper. He still has plenty of money, though, and plenty of places he can spend it. And we're getting some new reporting now, first from Axios and now in the New York Times with some finer details about the way in which he's planning to spend money in this midterm cycle. According to the New York Times, Elon Musk has authorized his super PAC to spend $100 to $120 million on a new field program in at least 8 states to help elect Republicans in November. They're trying to focus on turnout, Jeff.
It's like a rounding error for him.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of sandwiches.
Yes.
And so we assembled our political panel for their take on this, the re-emergence of Elon Musk as a political force. Joining us today, Rosemary Becchi, our Republican strategist, founder president, Jersey First, on this Jersey Mike's IPO day. Doug Farrar is here as well, principal at Maywood Strategies, our Democratic strategist. Rosemary, let's put down the sub for a minute. Is this good for Republicans? I realize it's a financial boost, but Elon Musk is a controversial figure. We remember the Teslas all burning and the Doge effort and the rest. Will he help Republicans win in November?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think that this will be actually very helpful for Republicans, having him get involved in this. You know, there are so many, things out there that are swirling. And frankly, as we look across the country and we see all these different proposals out there with regards to wealth taxes, right, at the state level, and we're starting to see it emerge even at the federal level. So he's got a vested interest, right, in getting involved at this point. And I think that that's an important opportunity. And I do think that it will help Republicans this fall.
Well, so when we consider then as the Democrat, Doug, how worried you feel about this. If Elon Musk is having to spend this kind of money to focus on turnout, does that say something about the turnout concerns that Republicans have going into the midterm that may, at least for the time being, advantage Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, Republicans aren't thrilled by and large with how things are going, and they're probably not inclined to turn out because gas prices are high, grocery prices are high, and Trump's basically broken all of his promises. Look, that's a lot of money. I mean, Democrats should be worried. And the fact that we have a campaign system where a once trillionaire can drop a rounding error across the country and maybe affect the outcome of races is a huge problem of its own. Musk has tried to pay for elections before. You guys might remember he paid $10 million to a candidate in Kentucky who decided instead to take a position in the Trump administration. He tried to make himself the face of the Wisconsin Supreme Court election, lost by 10. So hopefully Democrats will attach his name to this effort. But I would say one other thing. It's all going towards knocking on doors. And this is actually one of the worst places or the least effective places you can spend a lot of money because people will just fake door knocks and collect their cash. So, yes, big problem, but maybe not, doomsday for the Democrats.
Democrats can have fun with this, though, right? What about the chainsaw of bureaucracy, the falling out with Trump, the black eye from Scott Bessent? This is not your everyday political donor here, Doug. You can make a lot of commercials with that, can't you?
I totally agree. Look, Trump or Musk isn't even popular with Republicans. I saw a poll that had him at 42% favorable, down from 75% when he started Doge. People don't love rich guys, messing up people's lives and destroying things like USAID that, ended up probably harming thousands and hundreds of thousands of people across the world. So, yeah, I think Democrats will try to attach Musk's name to this effort. They're happy to welcome another toxic billionaire into the Republican fold ahead of the elections for sure.
Of course, there's also a billionaire in the White House, Rosemary, and his political entity, the MAGA Inc. PAC, has way more money than Elon Musk is prepared to spend. They're sitting on $400 million, and they've hardly spent any of it in this cycle. Is it time to start deploying that capital?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think they certainly will. Look, this is going to be a hard-fought battle. this fall. And, for the House itself, we've got, 18 races that are considered toss-up. 14 of those are Republican, and so the White House is going to have to start to spend some money on these races. And it's going to be about the message, and it's going to be about who has a better solution, right? Who can solve the affordability issue. And that's what it's all going to come down to. And so it's going to be really important to get those messages, out, whether it's social media or just good old fashioned knocking on doors. You really got to get that message out.
This Gallup poll out today, Doug, might give you pause when you consider what Americans think about our election process, and it just is it's the backdrop of everything we're talking about here, with deep unease around election integrity. 67% worry that political leaders will pressure officials to change outcomes. Democrats, as you might expect, more than Republicans, far more anxious, 77% to 56% with Republicans. And 57% overall doubt ballots will be properly handled or secured. Republicans more than Democrats. Does this lack of trust, and the flames are being fanned frequently by the president himself, result in a lack of turnout?
It might, hopefully, as a Democrat, result in a lack of Republican turnout, but I think Democrats are pretty fired up. I think they want to prove that democracy and voting and our voting system can work by going to the polls and making it clear that they oppose Donald Trump and his Republican colleagues in the House and Senate. Look, the way people feel about the election system here in this country is 100% Donald Trump's fault, because he can't admit he lost an election in 2020, okay? He has made Republicans think that it's all rigged, which it is not. It is the freest and fairest election system in the world. And he's made Democrats rightly feel that he's trying to steal elections. This is a mess. And I hope that there is a big turnout and that all of the elections go well, because I believe the state people in charge of those will do a good job. And hopefully we can start to rebuild this trust across the partisan gap.
Well, of course, there's more primary elections coming up, and a big one on Tuesday for your party, especially, Doug, as we watch the Democratic Senate primary in Michigan. The establishment-backed Congresswoman Hailey Stevens up against progressive Abdul El-Sayed. And we have some pretty incredible polling that's just come out from Emerson College in the aftermath of their last debate that finds El-Sayed up 15 points on Hailey Stevens, 54% to 39%. The age breakdown is perhaps even more remarkable, as it's only voters 60 and over who prefer Hailey Stevens. But El-Sayed gets 61% of those between 18 and 39, actually, 73% of those between 40 and 49. And I wonder, as you look at these figures, Doug, and this kind of internal war that's happening within the Progressive Party and the progressive wing of it in the Democratic Party, if it makes you nervous about the prospects of keeping this seat blue in November, or if this might be a good thing for your party overall.
There are a lot of different takes. I think it's a good thing. Look, Hailey Stevens has benefited from something like $70 million in outside spending, some of it coming from AIPAC, lots of it coming from corporations. And for the Democrats, a lot of voters are looking at that and saying, no thanks. We don't want this anymore. We want change. We want someone who's really going to do something about our affordability crisis. Abdul El-Sayed is pitching Medicare for all. He's pitching lots of different policies that I think are right on the economy. And the demo that you noted, which I'm just outside of, I'm afraid to say, is looking around, having graduated high school, gone to college, and now is trying to figure out what their future is going to be like, and saying, this economy is not working for me. And when you have a fired up base and a super unpopular president, I think you could see El-Sayed do really well in this election, despite some of the establishment concerns about his electability against Rogers.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Rosemary is liking that idea. Rosemary, am I right? Mike Rogers thinks he can beat El-Sayed a lot easier than dealing with Hailey Stevens. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great matchup here. Look, I think at the end of the day, the American people, and particularly in Michigan, are not looking for, socialists to be running this country. And I do think, Mike Rogers is a very strong candidate and will do, frankly, extraordinarily well if, in fact, El Sayed does win that primary.
Although he is not, we should mention, a Democratic socialist. He is not a member of that, even if the DSA may be campaigning for him in Michigan. But Rosemary, I would imagine you're not going to be the only Republican we talk to between now and November if he wins that's going to try to cast him as one. Is that not the point?
That's absolutely the point. I mean, and frankly, it's so fascinating to see what's kind of occurring with these primaries and these potential new members of both the Senate and the House. You're going to have, similar to a Freedom Caucus or a Tea Party on the left side, right? And frankly, it's going to end up pulling the agenda. And so it'll be very fascinating to watch as that potentially could play out in both the House and the Senate, frankly.
Indeed. All right, Rosemary Becchi, founder and president of Jersey First and Republican strategist, alongside Democratic strategist Doug Farrar, principal at Maywood Strategies. Thank you both for joining us as we look ahead to that crucial primary on Tuesday. It's going to be one to watch as we beat the drum to November and consider what the ballots of the Senate may ultimately look like, especially, Joe, if the president is considering on the post-midterm Senate being the one to advance the confirmation of Todd Blanche. We'll see how that all works out for him.
The lame duck report. We're looking forward to hosting that as well after November. This is Bloomberg.
It's 1:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Chips jump, oil slumps. We've got Microsoft shares ripping higher, and the SOX, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange Semiconductor Index, up now by 7.8%. Bottom line, Dow, S&P, NASDAQ are all moving higher. Stocks are rallying, getting a boost from a surge in Microsoft after earnings. That stock up 17% now. S&P's up 103 to 74.19. That is a gain of 1.4%. NASDAQ now higher by 609 points for the NASDAQ Composite Index, an advance of 2.5%. The NASDAQ 100 Index up by 3.1%. The Dow up 540 on the Dow, a gain there of 1%. The Bloomberg Mag 7 Index up 1.9%, but the SOX, perhaps the big story, dip buyers coming back to chips. We've got the SOX up now by 7.8%. The 10-year, the day after the Fed decision, 4.66%. The all-important 2-year at 4.22%, and the 30-year 5.21% on the 30-year. Spot gold up $38 the ounce to $41.05. Spot gold up 0.9%. West Texas Intermediate crude right now $84 a barrel, down 0.5%. Brent below 90, down today by 1.5%. Barrel of Brent crude 89.33. MasterCard shares pushing higher. We've got MasterCard up by roughly 2.5%. It reported a 21% profit surge as the company benefited from its expansion beyond traditional payment network services. Rival Visa down now by 1.5%. Keeping an eye on the Jersey Mike's IPO, right now $22 even. It went out the door just about 23. It is trading lower by roughly 3%. We got CEO Charlie Morrison, by the way, on the menu coming up at 2:40 Wall Street time. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcast. I'm Charlie Pellet. Joe and Kailey, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You'll have more on the markets coming up at the top of the hour, 2 p.m. Eastern time, as we kick off Bloomberg Business Week daily. Watching Wall Street on a much better day than yesterday, and kind of nice to see someone rewarded for good news here with, again, Microsoft up 17 points. It'll be interesting to see how Apple and Amazon fare this evening, with Apple coming in off the top rope here. It's up quite a bit year to date, more than 20%. Amazon a little bit less, so it's up about 5% year to date, so might not be judged quite as brutally as some of these others. Big question we keep hearing, though, is about a bubble. And Kevin Hassett isn't having any of it. The idea of AI spending bumping into a ceiling and leaving enormous amounts of money that have been bet on the building of data centers and the advancement of AI at risk. He actually joined us earlier today on Bloomberg, of course, the president's economic advisor, live from the White House. Here's what he said.
The difference between the dot-com boom of the 90s and what we're seeing now with AI is that the AI companies are actually making money. So remember back then we had insane valuations for firms that had yet to make any money at all.
So as we consider who is making money and who's spending a lot of money that the market isn't sure is necessarily going to pay off, and look at what's happening in tech and AI plays overall, we turn to the Bloomberg Tech host, Ed Ludlow, who's joining us now from San Francisco. It's, of course, a very busy week for him as he covers earnings across the board. And before we talk about the earnings that we're going to get in just a few hours after the bell, Ed, if we could recap the earnings we got yesterday, we're looking at the biggest move for Microsoft going back to 2008 with this 17% gain. Is this just a matter of the stock having been beaten down somewhat, so now we're seeing a massive recovery, or is the cloud growth really that good?
Well, good point, because it was down year to date and a laggard of the biggest technology names, right, the Mag 7. The other way I'd look at it is that you could look at the percentage gain, but as we write on the Bloomberg, it's on track to add almost $500 billion of market value in a single day, which would be a record just on market value terms. Crazy. No one's ever done that in the history of the stock market. But it's so interesting because, like, you know, for each of these companies, the math, the equation is the same. Here is some data of how much we're spending on AI infrastructure. And then the Wall Street says, what is the return on that investment? What have you got to show for it? And in Microsoft's case, it was really simple. They gave financial metrics like their cloud computing unit growing at the fastest pace since 2022. But they also said, this is the product that we sell, Copilot, and people use it. And that seems to have been a good message that Wall Street liked. I think Joe Mathieu said rewarding good news, but I would just say it's a different type of news beyond financial numbers.
30 million seats was a pretty good number there. And I wonder if Amazon will be able to tell a similar cloud story, or if Apple, you know, Microsoft, as we've been discussing, has been rewarded for not spending beyond its means. Apple's been rewarded for kind of not spending at all. Does that continue tonight?
Well, the Apple story has almost been like Apple is the AI safety trade. Apple doesn't have a CapEx story. Its CapEx number is probably going to be $12 billion for the fiscal year, maybe just slightly over. Amazon, by comparison, $200 billion. And so, like, you know, Amazon's story is very aligned with Microsoft. You know, they expect the cloud unit AWS to grow at the fastest pace in some time. But Amazon more recently has been giving these kind of other metrics about how its investments in AI make traction. And compare and contrast with Meta last night, you know, Meta just wasn't able to say, here's something tangible. Here's the other side of all of the work we've done, not just in the research and development side of AI, but all the infrastructure they've built. So Amazon, like, again, in line with Microsoft, it's a more clear-cut story. Apple really is a story about Tim Cook and smartphones.
Well, we're going to have a lot more for you coming up later on today after the bell. And on the late edition of Balance of Power, we'll be joined by the great Ed Ludlow. It's good to see you, Ed, and thank you so much. Bloomberg Tech, of course, and the man behind it. It's going to be something else after 4 o'clock. The building here at Bloomberg will shake again. As we add the voice of Bloomberg Politics contributor Patrick McHenry, of course, the former Republican congressman who used to chair the House Financial Services Committee, Speaker Pro Tem, is with us right now. Mr. McHenry, welcome back. I wasn't planning to talk to you about this, but our audience should know that you do a lot of work out in Silicon Valley now, and you're a big player in the corporate space. You probably have a much better seat for this show than a lot of investors do. When you hear questions about the durability of this AI build-out, the race against China, and the questions of what inning we are in, what are you hearing?
Well, Mythos was a defining moment, and it shifted the debate in Washington and among corporate players on the use of AI. We see the token tracking that every corporate is now engaged in. CFOs went from spend at all cost on AI to now let's make sure we're getting something for this engagement and this extraordinary cost on tokens going to the frontier labs. So we've seen a large shift this calendar year, distinct from what we saw last year. Last year was all about the build and the competition with China to make sure that we're ahead. This year, we're seeing a shift post-Mythos to ensuring we have competition on the frontier and in the second generation and on with the use of AI, and the rising use and need for open models and open weights, so that we have open source as a key player to balance out this rising cost of AI usage. So there's a lot happening here. This Microsoft story is absolutely fascinating because it's one of the long-term old players in tech and still had such a massive move today. You're seeing something likewise in Washington policy circles, that the shifts on AI, the uncertainty on what AI will mean for the economy, that's a huge driver of our politics, not just the day-to-day stuff, but this is going to be the really large debate within the parties and with the electorate, not just for the midterm, but going into the next presidential. It will be a defining issue of the debate between the candidates and the parties.
I just knew I could turn him into a tech stock analyst. It was just a matter of time.
100%. Speaking of tech stocks, really quickly, obviously it's been pretty easy to get on the wrong side of a trade given all the volatility in AI and software names as of late. That is a problem for the hedge fund situational awareness, which there's been a lot of reporting about today. This was a hedge fund started by a very young man who used to work for OpenAI, and Bloomberg is now reporting, a redhead just crossing the terminal, that its assets have fallen to about $10 billion after having to offload a bunch of its stock in a sale to Citadel. CNBC had reported earlier today that the assets as of July 1st, or the net asset value rather, was $45 billion. So clearly this is a material drop after the losses that they experienced with some wrong way bets on software names and AI names, Jeff.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it really speaks to just the incredible amount of leverage that's been behind these trades. I mean, look at Micron today, one of the three top holdings in this hedge fund, just moving with abandon. It's up $131 or 18% now, Kailey, after dropping by similar fashion yesterday. People are wondering what these breakneck moves are all about, and situational awareness raises its head as at least one of the reasons.
Yeah, a lot of attention on Leopold Aschenbrenner.
25 years old?
Yep, and under a lot of pressure, I would imagine. As we bring the conversation, though, back to Chairman McHenry, as we have this conversation around the artificial intelligence trade, on the artificial intelligence regulatory race, whether or not we're going to see more action on that, either from the White House or from Capitol Hill, I wonder if the way AI is being treated now reminds you of how crypto was being treated at the beginning. Crypto, which, mind you, we still don't necessarily have our regulatory arms around, as the Clarity Act still doesn't seem like it has a clear way forward in the Senate, at least as of now, Mr. Chairman.
Well, here we're in a different context. AI can run very hard and grow at a very large rate without the need for clear rules of the road from Washington. What crypto needs is clear rules of the road for mass adoption across heavily regulated financials. The Clarity Act is that opportunity on Capitol Hill to define the clear rules of the road in law on what is a digital asset, a means of exchange, and its use. We see the Clarity Act having passed the House of Representatives over a year ago. Now the Senate has been wrestling with this publicly for the last couple of months. The final key issues for the Clarity Act are, number one, conflicts of interest for the centralized exchanges. Number one. Number two, law enforcement, the clear definition of developer protections for open source software developers and DeFi. And then third and finally, and most importantly, politically, is the debate around ethics. You have serious policymakers engaged on that, on defining what is a set of ethics restrictions on the person of the president and elected officials. And you see leaders like Senator Gallego, Senator Tillis, who are formulating policy, not just the rhetoric around this, but actually writing policy that is enforceable and durable under law here. This is tough stuff, and I think Senator Gallego and Senator Tillis have shown real leadership in working together on something that could pass muster and help unlock the ability for the Clarity Act to pass either this next week or in September or in the fall.
Senator Tillis showing up in a lot of stories these days.
Oh, yes.
Your old friend is part of the reason.
He's a one-man marching band.
Isn't that true? We're going to play this for him. Tell him we had this conversation because the president wants his attorney general to be confirmed. Todd Blanche, that confirmation vote has been postponed because of Tillis and John Cornyn, both of whom not great fans, I guess, of the president and vice versa. He primaried them, and they're giving him a hard time back. They want a piece of paper that says there will be no anti-weaponization fund before they nominate or confirm, I should say, the nominee in this case. President Trump posting on Truth Social, he might just withdraw the name over this. What's going to happen here, Mr. Chairman?
Well, look, the senators that have the deciding votes here are going to get what they want, or they're going to get Todd Blanche's head. They're not fighting directly. If you listen to the senators, they're not saying that President Trump is wrong. They're even going out of office. That's not something they think is wise. What they're saying is that the president is being ill-served by his advisors. That is what you're hearing from Senator Cornyn, Senator Tillis. What they want is an assurance of the Attorney General's proper actions, specifically on the anti-weaponization fund and a few other limitations. The Attorney General, I think, in a normal process, would be able to come to terms with directly with these senators and give them that assurance. In this case, it's going to be the White House staff that's going to determine whether or not those assurances can be given. And until that time, you're not going to see a vote on Todd Blanche's Attorney General nomination, even if he is well qualified, which is what these senators are saying. That those things will be delayed, and I don't think it's forever, but it could be for a period of time. With Senator Thune trying to manage the Senate floor, this is a very, very complicated closeout before the August recess. The next week and a half are going to be very, very challenging for the Senate to get through these set of issues in any sort of reasonable way.
Yeah, wouldn't necessarily want to be Majority Leader John Thune right now. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, as always, for joining us. The former chair of the House Financial Services Committee, Patrick McHenry, now a Bloomberg Politics contributor. And we'll be back with more Balance of Power on the late edition at 5 p.m. Eastern. So stick with us for that. In the meantime, Bloomberg Business Week Daily is just ahead right here on Bloomberg TV and radio.